Welcome to Lisa's workshop, Can I Really Self-Coach Myself? Expanding my own boundaries here. I'm going to introduce Lisa as a leader and coach. Lisa is a woman of many hats. She is an ICF professional certified coach with passion for projects. Lisa sees herself as someone who enables change and growth for those around her and within any organization. She is deeply passionate about helping clients maximize their performance potential. While teaching and empowering coaches through a coaching academy, she helps teams and individuals transform as a coach, both professionally and personally. Fun fact about Lisa. Lisa loves her soup. She has become a soup blogger where she shares her passion for Chinese soups. Lisa loves what she does because she is constantly creating a positive impact and a sustainable change for those around her. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you, Shanza. So I want to say welcome to everyone, and apologies for the technical that started us late, but we will end on time at 10:55 so you can get to your next session. It is a really informal session, and what's going to happen today is we're going to talk through some of the concepts of coaching, and then I'm going to do a live demo about how I self-coach. It's quite an interesting exercise, something that you could think about. And then we'll go into quick breakouts just to share what you're observing, what's emerging for you, what you're learning about, and then come back together to do a checkout before I let you go. So I'm pretty open about, you can raise your hand, you can just unmute yourself if you want to jump in, use the chat if you've got a question, but it's pretty much a free flow session for you to explore this topic and what it means for you. So I'm going to share the screen right now and get into it. And I know some people are still rolling in, so welcome. All right. I'm not going to put it on full screen presentation because at one point I will need to, I guess, analyze myself at one point. That's a self-coaching piece. So as we begin, it's really about, by the end of today's session, what you're going to explore about for you is really what happens in a coaching session. Fundamentally, there is some science behind it, and I'll explain that. So what is self-coaching? What are the inputs needed for self-coaching? So recognizing that there's a recipe or a formula that allows for this to happen. And I'm going to talk through some. And that's where some of the science around the positive psychology, thinking forward, comes in. And then also the other interesting thing that I really appreciate is around learning loops. And that is in a bit later. I'm going to do a self-reflection, a live demo, and share how I dissect that myself in a self-coaching session for myself, and then how you can think about going to put this into practice for yourself. All right. So as a coach professionally, what we really believe is that people are naturally creative and resourceful. So as coaches, professional coaches, this is what we believe in. So the question is, so can this apply to myself? What about me? And this is where I started with this journey of, okay, can we really self-coach? And some of us do better than others, and we might be doing it without realizing. But the question is, can we actually proactively recognize it and then improve on it? And so this is where it's practice makes perfect, but it's actually perfect practice makes perfect. So the more we practice this muscle as a skill for ourselves, the better we can get at it. And this is where I really like this image about creating this self-sustainable loop for yourself. And so there's this belief where my belief is that you learn it, you apply it to yourself, and you grow within yourself. And that's where this self-evolution, self-transformation, self-change can really come about. And so what I'm going to start with first is, what is self-coaching? And so fundamentally, there's some principles that I'm going to just land first. If there's any questions at this point, just let me know. But there are some principles that essentially define what coaching is as a start. And then what we'll do is move to that. Well, what does that mean for me then? If I understand these principles, how can I use it for myself? All right, so this is a bit of a busy page, but I want to take some time here to explain what it means. So as a coach, and when I teach coaches this, what it means is fundamentally the client is the person sitting inside the bottle. So when you're going through your story, you can't really see what's happening because you're in the bottle, you're in your story. But what a coach can do is create that outside perspective. So as you're telling your story, you start to populate that label on the outside. And that's where the coach can start to see, I'm seeing your label, your story, your situation, your thinking as you're telling the story. And then what the coach can do is pick out the pieces of the story that matter. So they'll give you back observations around possibilities, concerns, beliefs, emotions, all of these the coach can observe. So on the right side is some of the principles that I'm going to talk about on, all right, during this process, what happens? So in a coaching process, the first thing that we want to recognize is that we're outside of our own story. And there are moments here's where we're going to distinguish. I'm in my story. I'm in the moment. I'm upset or overwhelmed, and that's fine. That's for you to really be part of your story in the moment. But at one point, what I'm going to teach in this session is really, all right, how can I observe myself outside of my story? The second thing is there's a feedback loop. So that means I'm able to feed back to myself what I'm observing very objectively. So I'm going to show how that can be done as well. The third one is really creating buckets of observations. Can I observe certain elements? For example, can I observe an emotion in myself? Can I observe a belief in myself? Can I observe a possibility in myself? And I'm going to demonstrate that through an example as well. So start to really observe yourself as you're going through looking at your own story or situation. The fourth concept is that the client can see these observations. So that means you're able to see these buckets and these observations for yourself. The fifth one really is around objectivity as much as possible. And of course, in yourself, sometimes in the moment, it's really hard, but that's where we're going to create, I guess, a moment where you can allow yourself to step out of your own bottle. And that's where we're going to allow ourselves to disconnect. And so it's almost like split personalities in a sense. But however, the tools that I'm going to show you really to allow you to say, all right, how can I disconnect in the moment when I need to? The sixth piece is about something that, that we teach is called a loss frame or a gain frame. And so what it means is really, can we look for components that will help propel us forward or backwards? So anything that's really holding us back, not allowing us to move forward is what we call a loss frame. So when, for example, clients are talking about things happening in the past, or why is this happening to me? That's a loss frame. So we spend a lot of negative, or actually we spend a lot of energy in a frame that's not helping us. What we want to look for are the opportunities of what I call a gain frame. And that's where you'll try to find, how can I move myself forward? What is it that I really want? And what we're going to do is try to pick out those gain frames and spend energy on the gain frames rather than spending energy on the loss frames. And then the other thing to recognize is there are things that happen in the moment right now. So when you're going through a situation or you want to evaluate yourself, what happens in the moment now is actually different from what will happen when you look back on it. So recognizing what's happening now is actually quite important. And then the eighth point really is looking for what's positive and what's possible. And so that's what I'm talking about is, can we recognize these loss and positive frames? And then at the very end, the last thing is coaching is really about what am I learning? Am I observing something here about myself that I can action on? And that's fundamentally part of how we're going to start landing some of these principles to apply to oneself. So I'm going to take a pause right now just to see if there are any questions, any thoughts, anything that jumps out that you guys want to ask around these principles. And I know it doesn't always land so easily for people who are just starting on a journey of coaching. Some of you do it already, but it's really putting some science behind it and some facts. So what we're going to do is now say, all right, now I know some of these principles. What do I do with it? All right, so what I'm going to show next is how we can begin this journey of self-coaching, recognizing some of these principles. So what needs to start first with self-coaching is that you have to have some self-awareness, first of all. So the awareness around what's happening with myself, what's going on, what am I really thinking? What did I say? And then what we're going to do is move into the second bubble, is then analyze ourselves with that self-awareness and begin to pick out those pieces that are positive and possible so that we can move forward in whatever situation that we're in. It could be a work situation, a personal situation, but that's what we want to do, is begin to extract the pieces that can help us move forward. And then finally, when we have something that's positive and possible, what we want to then say is, how can I be energized to commit to it and then action on what I'm observing and learning about myself? So that's really, in summary, how we can use the principles then to move through this phase. All right, so how do we apply this? So I know there's, well, how can I apply the principles with myself? Well, the first one is really then to create a space where you can be outside of yourself. And again, there's a lot of moments that can work for anyone. And what you'll need to reflect on is what works best for you. So for me personally, I started with journaling. And it was just in the moment, I'll just write what's happening, it's basically a dump of how I'm feeling in the moment. And it's quite interesting because when I come back to analyze it later, and that's where I'll show you how this works, I begin to see things that I didn't see when I was in the moment. And as I practice this more, I realized I'm able to do it live, real time, right, when I'm running. So I usually tend to run when I get frustrated or overworked. And I find as I'm running, I'm doing this dissection in my head. And that's where I always like to tell my students is that coaching actually is a muscle. This skill of coaching and the self-coaching needs to be trained. Being able to step outside of yourself is not easy, especially when we're emotional in the moment, but it is a trained muscle. And it is something that you can train over time with starting out with something that like journaling. You write it down in the moment and we'll come back to it to observe. And then there's different ways to go through it. So cooking, proposal writing, brainstorming, whatever works for you to allow yourself to capture your situation, your story, what you want to self-coach through in the moment. And that's something for you to reflect on what's the best medium. But the point is that there is a medium. And that's why people hire professional coaches, right? Because the coach is their medium. But is there a way we can use this on ourselves without really getting to a professional coach? And so that's what we're trying to do in this workshop, is to let's create an environment where it's almost like a coach, but I'm allowed to offload something and then come back to it in a different frame of mind. So I want to do a little exercise here first, just to show this shift is possible. So the exercise is, if you want to join me on camera, is quite simple. All you need is your finger. And what we're going to do is lift your elbow up and point to the ceiling. And what you're going to do is, so you should be able to see your finger and draw a circle going clockwise. So draw a circle going clockwise. And then what you need to do is bring your elbow down, keep that clockwise motion, bring your elbow down so that you're looking on top of your finger. So the finger is right like at your chin. Keep going lower, 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 right under your chin. Now look at that circle. What direction is it going in? Look down.
Counterclockwise now.
Yes. So what I'm trying to highlight here is it's the same situation, the same motion. Nothing's really changed about the situation, but our perspective. So what I want to allow for this then is that through coaching, self-coaching even, are we able to bring a different perspective for ourselves in our situation? And the answer to that is fundamentally yes, it is possible. And I mean, it doesn't even go this way. There's so many perspectives out there. So the question now is, with this tools, what perspective can I give myself and allow myself so I can move forward and transform or change through a situation that I want to be able to self-coach myself on? So that's the really neat exercise that I wanted to show. And it's quite fascinating in that they'll look at it and like, oh, wow, that is totally different. And it's possible. Perspective is the thing that changes mindset. And it changes how we see things and how we move things forward. All right, so I'm going to move on to the next piece, which is learning loops. All right, so this is super fascinating, and thinking about learning loops will help you as you're processing your situation when you come back to it on learning more about yourself. It's a little bit deep, so I'm going to go through examples, which are on the right-hand side. So fundamentally, and coaches use these loops with their clients all the time. So I'll use a second or third loop all the time, but use it on yourself, use it on your kids. So the first loop is really inquiring about learning. It's fundamentally, what have I learned so far? What am I learning? And those are usually could be quite factual things. For example, 1 + 1 = 2, or I'm learning I need to say no more often. Or the third example is, I'm learning how to recognize a lost frame, like today. Or I'm learning I'm a control freak. I like to be in control of a lot of things. So those are some things that you can observe as learning for yourself. The second loop is where it gets super interesting. The second loop is you're going to inquire about the application of learning on yourself. So what that means is, what am I going to now do with this learning? Or how will this new insight change the way I work or think or be? So using the examples is, again, so the first one is, I can use math when I'm buying things. The second example is, I know I need to say no more often. And when I say no, I'm learning that I'm offering other suggestions. The third example is, today you've learned what a loss frame is. So now what I'm going to do is apply a flip technique. And I'm going to teach this to you in a bit about when you're recognizing in a loss frame or everything's negative. A really useful question, and I'll type this out, is what would I like to have happen? And how this syntax is set up is what means I'm searching. Would I like is I'm giving an invitation to myself. So I'm giving to really look for would I like. To have is to create that ownership for myself, and happen is in the future state. So when you're recognizing a loss frame, if everything's negative, and again, you can use this on someone else too, you just replace it. What would you like to have happen? Is you begin to create an environment where you're moving the negative loss frame into a gain and positive frame. And it's very powerful on other people as well. I really encourage you to try it, but you need the pauses. So what would you like to have happen? And you can ask this on yourself as well. And when you're recognizing that things aren't really working, going out, just take a pause and ask that question. What is it that you really want then? And this will help you flip to a positive frame and then move forward. All right, and then the fourth example about the second loop is, I'm a control freak. I'm learning this about myself. But what I'm learning about this is that I need to then prioritize to let go of A, B, or C. And then the third learning loop is an even deeper loop. It's about really fundamentally us, ourselves, the value, how we're set up, our core is really inquire about how you're learning about yourself. So the question you can ask yourself is, what am I noticing about how I'm learning this? Or what am I noticing about how I'm behaving or in these situations? And trying to see it here, it's covered. How has this changed the way I see myself right now? And for example, I'm going to use examples. The first one is, I'm learning that I need to apply it before I truly understand it. This is what I'm learning about me, myself. Or the second example is, this is how I manage my guilt of saying no, actually, by offering a compromise I can accept. And the third example is, I'm recognizing that drilling a certain tool allows me how to recognize how to use it. And that's the only way I can learn, is to drill it, to use it. And finally, the fourth example is, if I focus on the things that matter, I can begin to let go of things that don't. So you will get the slides. Shanza will have them. I've shared them, and we can definitely share them with you so you have the questions. But one of the great techniques now is to say, when I'm going back to dissect my thinking, remember we talked about allowing a medium or forum for your thoughts to be merged in the moment, to capture them so that we can come back to it. So these are some of the questions you can really fundamentally begin to ask yourself so that you can coach yourself through what you're recognizing in the situation from before. All right, so what I'm going to do now is move to an example. I'm just going to pause here to see if there are any questions, any thoughts that you guys want to ask at this time. Okay, so here's an example. It's quite typical for me because I have a lot on my plate. So what happens in this scenario is, like I said, in the moment, when I find that I just need to de-stress, I'll journal. And so I usually do journal electronically. And you can journal on paper as well. Electronically for me is because it's digital, it's mobile, and then I know I can dissect it afterwards. So let me play out this example. I'm so frustrated. Nothing is working as it should. I feel totally overwhelmed right now. Talk about when things break down, it all breaks down together. I have a pile of to-dos for my projects waiting, and all the meanwhile getting bombarded by email requests by my boss who says everything is urgent. On top of that, my eldest daughter has slept the day away, holed up in her room with her eyes glued to her device. None of the house chores are done. And then I need to pull myself together to deliver a coaching practice later tonight, which I'm not feeling up for. I can't control what's happening. Why now? Why me? I know I'm totally feeling sorry for myself now and wallowing in self-pity and all that stuff, but I can't help it. I'm so tired. I'm overworked. I'm stressed. I think I need to just burn this off somehow. All right. So the reason why I do write it down electronically is then because I come back to it and I start highlighting the pieces that matter. So let's go back to the principles that I talked about early on and see how we can apply it here. So one of the first things I'm seeing is there's a lot of emotion. So what I'm going to do is start using colors just to show some of the differences. There's emotion here, and it's also in a loss frame. So it's a negative frame. That's what I'm recognizing. All right, here. So let's highlight this. Loss frame. Nothing is working as it should. So still continuation, the loss frame. So the loss frames we can hold for now. I feel totally overwhelmed right now. So more emotion. Talk about when things break down, it all breaks down together. Is this really true? Is this a belief or assumption that I've got right now? Right? And so this is what I'm saying. When I come back to it, when I'm a little more calm, and this is how I'm doing my dissection, I say, is this really true? Is everything really broken? Not really. But it's an interesting thing to note that there's a belief that I was actually tabling at this moment. And then I ask myself, is it really true? I have a pile of to-dos for my projects waiting, and all the meanwhile getting lucky. La 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 la. Honestly, a lot of this sometimes as a coach, all this up to here, sorry, is just my situation. It's what's happening right now in the moment. So I'm minimizing it really small because it's just part of my story. It's not really helping me at this moment. It's just stuff that's happening in the moment. So I'm just going to minimize that. Sorry, I'm going to minimize that. None of the house chores are done. Oh, that's also, let's minimize that as well. All right. And then I need to pull myself together. Interesting. There's this word of a need. I'm recognizing there's something happening here. So let's talk about that, right? So that's really a need with a desire. Is there a want there? Something there that I'm recognizing that's important. I can't control what's happening. All right, again, is this really true? So I ask myself that. And so it's interesting now, I'm trying to, as I look back on this, right, I'm stepping outside my own frame to be able to see my thinking. And that's what's happening. To Bree's question, I just use OneNote or Evernote. Any of the free tools are fine. With OneNote, it's because I have it on my phone as well as on my computer, and it's on the cloud. So I can, anytime I need it, it's just easy. All right. So is this really true? Why now? Why me? Okay, that's more feeling sorry for myself. So some more lost frames here, not very helpful. And then, so I'm going to minimize, I'm going to color this as well. And then I know I'm totally feeling sorry for myself right now and wallowing self-pity and all that stuff, but I can't help it. So more emotions, more lost frame. So the lost frame, not very helpful. I'm so tired, I'm overworked, I'm stressed. So some emotions in there. I think I need to just burn this off somehow. Oh, there's something here about possibility and something that's positive. So again, need, possible, possibility, or plus what's positive. So I'm going to hold this. So then what happens is when I look back on this, you know, after some time, I'll say, all right, what is it that I need? So everything else fundamentally, that's either a lost frame, don't need to talk about it this moment. And this, is this really true? I can answer that to myself. But what I want to really look at is I need to pull myself together. So I'm recognizing there's something here, which I'm going to highlight. And I think I just need to burn this off somehow. Okay. So when I come back to this, I'll look at it and say, all right, you know, I was just feeling sorry for myself. That's fine. I have a coaching session. I know I need to pull myself together and I need to burn this off. So what is it that I need to do to allow myself to burn this off so I'm ready for my coaching practice tonight? And that's how I can come back and just focus on the things that are positive and possible for me to move on. But I needed to go through that download and that dump, which is why in the end, I wrote the journal and I think I need to burn this off. Then I go for a run or I go for, you know, an exercise session, whatever it is I need to do to burn this off so that there's a need that I know I'm recognizing I fundamentally need to get ready for by tonight. And this is just a very simple way of dissecting myself after I've gone through some of the feeling sorry for myself and wallowing. I'll come back to it quite quickly, actually, after I realize that I need to burn this off. I'll burn it off and then I'll come back to saying, what is it that I really need? And I'll know and I'll see it. So Rachel's question is, I'm going to take a pause here, is how much time would you give yourself to write and then come back to it? That's a very personal question. Some people need a lot longer, but again, if you want, and it takes practice, like I said, right? So you can come back to it maybe a day, depends on the subject as well. For me, I've been practicing it for a while, so I can do it while I'm running. And so I'll always ask myself, what would I like to have happened? And every time I'm like wallowing in myself, I'll ask myself like, what would I like to have happened? And then I'll answer my own question and say, here's what I need to do. Here's what I need to focus on. So it is very personal to yourself. I would say experiment. Try it out, come back to it and say, are you in the right mind? Actually, this actually brings me to one of the, I'm going to move on to another page, which will be useful before we go into breakout, because we were going to go into breakout now, but there's one page I want to maybe bring in now to help answer that question. Is this, ask yourself this question then at the very end, is this the only way I can think? So if you're in a moment where for you, it's very emotional, it's heated, it's something that you're working through, and you ask yourself, is this the only way I can think? If the answer is yes, that means you're not ready to come back to it. Because a yes means that I'm still here, I'm stuck in this moment. So come back to ask yourself, is this the only way I can think? And if you say, no, there's other ways, then you might be ready to come back to doing that dissection yourself. And this question, is this the only way I can think, can only be asked to yourself, because it's a very challenging question. Only is positioned as, is that it for you? And so this is a very self-reflective, self-coaching question. And so to answer your question is, this might be to Rachel's, this would be a good criteria to say, are you ready to come back to do a dissection for yourself? And some other questions that you can ask about learning loop is, like the first one, what would I like to have happened? Fundamentally, a really great question. Just try it on yourself about when you're in a negative frame to flip it into something that's more positive and possible. And I would encourage you to try it on others. It works great on my kids. It works on my team. So people that come to me and they're complaining about, so that, what would you like to have happened? And it gives pause to the past and the complaints about future thinking. And then other questions that you can consider asking for yourself when you're doing dissections is, what would I like to acknowledge in myself? What makes this belief to be true? That's a really good one. So for example, in my own reflections, for example, is this one, I can't control what's happening. Okay, what makes this statement valid? I ask myself that. And to be honest, you know, it's not really a true statement, right? And we'll know that, we'll recognize that. What positive difference will this possibility bring me? So once you highlight that possible, that need. So for example, in my example, it was, I need to be ready to do a coaching practice tonight. So what positive difference will it bring to me if I'm ready? Well, I'll be my best coach. I'll do a good practice session. So this is another question that you can land on as you're doing your dissection. And what makes this, whatever that could be, important to me? So what makes it important for me to be ready tonight for my coaching practice session? And then at the very end of it, you can wrap it and say, what am I learning about myself? And could I be wrong? And if so, how? So I'm just going to give a bit of a pause here. And I know there's a lot of material, and I call this the marinating moment. When I see a lot of people thinking and just marinating in these things for yourself. So Bree's got another question here, is how do you find time to burn this off if you have a particularly busy day? For me, and this is just how I do it, but everyone has different tactics. I am very pointed with boundaries. So in my calendar, I will have blackouts. And especially for running or for riding, I will have sections of days where I've blacked it out, and that's just for me. And that's something you can consider, but that's really around boundaries. And whether burning it off is even the right mechanism for you to be able to just downtime, right? Some people will have quiet time, meditation, yoga, and that's where your self-reflection around the process, just being very aware of what process works for me, but calling that sacred time. And that's a whole total other topic around time management and stuff. But self-coaching, fundamentally, you do need time to allow it to happen. Just like a muscle, I've given you a membership to the gym, but I can't give you 6 packs. I'm sorry. So what you'll need to do is really take that membership, right, and exercise it. And how does it become more natural and more spontaneous, more on the go as a self-coaching technique for yourself is a muscle. That's the only thing I can offer. So what we're going to do now really quickly is we're not going to break out. What I want to do is maybe just spend 5 minutes to do a quick checkout. You want to share with me what's emerging, what's landing, how is it marinating for you? Or is it marinating at all, right? Any thoughts, comments, questions that you guys want to just throw out there before we close our session?
This is absolutely resonating for me. And I just had a situation last night. And I was a bit wound up, especially from yesterday's leadership discussions. They were so great. They were just pumping me up. And then I had a long Zoom call with another. So a suggestion was made to me to have a cup of tea and go relax. And I did, and went to sleep. And it really just gave me some perspective, which you were talking about. And step out. I love that idea of stepping out from your situation. When I'm in a intense buzz of I'm going round and round and round, that's a great concept to step out from it. If you can, it's hard to.
Yep, I agree. It's hard, which is why practicing to step out of yourself is a skill. And it does take practice. That's why there's these tools to allow you to just dump what you need and then step out later. And as you're recognizing, what are you learning about yourself that you need to step out? And that's where the second loop and the third loop is where you start to develop yourself. Thanks for sharing, Marley. That's fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's helpful to recognize it in others as well. Like I recently had a moment where a friend sort of sent a text message and it was real hot, and it was like, okay, you know what? I think I'm gonna take a step back here. I'm not gonna respond right away because clearly, this person is going through something. And I think it's helpful if you can recognize it and then you can give them, the space that maybe they need. And maybe they don't even know they need.
Yes. And you can always be that mirror for them, right? It's a very objective mirror. Say, oh, I'm seeing that you've sent something that's heated, right? And that's where the job of a coach actually is, professional coaches at least, and that's where I'm trying to impart some of the techniques that you can actually try to really coach yourself.
I just wanted to say, Lisa, thanks. I really like how you demonstrated breaking down, like you highlighted things like the emotions with color and identified those pieces. And that I found that dissection really, really helpful. And I think it's really, I could take that away and really absorb that and do that. Because just putting those in those types of categories was really helpful. And I love the loss frame. The loss, gain, and gain frame is really I think those are excellent. So it's very helpful. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, the dissection is, when you do a dissection, it's very analytical. So what happens is you become objective.
Yeah.
And that's what we're trying to do, right? When in the moment when you're journaling, it's all emotional. It's like, but when you dissect it, it's an analytical exercise. So the idea is it's to allow you to remove these emotions and just these labels. Absolutely. Thank you.
I think taking the time even just to journal it is very cathartic. And you say like burning it off, but even just writing it down helps you to get into that space. So even if you don't have time to say go for a run, just taking a couple minutes to write it down helps you move your mindset into that next space.
Absolutely. And use a highlighter and go after those positive frames, right? Because that's what we want to be capturing. And a lot of times the negative frames, the lost frames, not helpful, right? So what I encourage my clients to do is what's the positive frame? And that's how we just hold on to that and move life forward in that way.
I really liked that piece as well, but I think that piece that you were saying you use on your kids and you use on others, the what would you like to have happen, is helpful, because I have a lot of older women who I either work with or network with, and I kind of almost feel a little weighed down sometimes when they come to me with some of their issues, and sometimes they're just looking for a sounding board, I know. And I'm always sitting there saying like, oh, well, what if you tried this? What if you tried that? And I'm like, I'm not a professional therapist. I don't know really how to help you through this. But that, finding the right time, of course, to say that, like letting them say their piece, and then finding the right time to insert that into the conversation, I think is really going to help me and help them realize like, yeah, I'm just here to listen. Thank you for sharing. But I can't solve your problem for you.
Yeah, I agree.
So thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Sorry, jumping in.
No worries, we're done.
Lisa, and thank you, everyone, for coming in. Your next session is at 11 a.m., Making Global Impact Through Local Opportunities workshop with Brielle Kaminsky. I put that on the chat room as well. And just wanted to also let you know that you can connect with fellow attendees with one-on-one chat feature that we have, and contribute to group discussions, make some connections with the local organizations, and sponsors virtual booths. So lots out there for you all, and you can take a break and go to the next session.